Continuing with Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, we're at rule number 9, titled Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Um, for me, in this particular rule, I haven't read this rule yet, but I'm thinking this rule is the rule that I should follow the least because I've given too many people too much credit. That's me personally. Each person is different, and I haven't given myself enough credit in the past, and I've given other people too much credit. I've had the most success when I've realized that, statistically speaking, I'm the smartest person in the room. So that goes against the title of this room. This rule: assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. But that is true, with everybody knows something in particular and has a specialty. While I'm talking here, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and place this video posted somewhere like on your Facebook or on your Twitter or something like that. Go ahead and check out my other videos as well. I'm a writer too. I wrote a book called Gods of Education. Okay, rule number 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Not advice. Psychotherapy is not advice. Advice is what you get when the person you're talking with about something horrible and complicated wishes you would just shut up and go away. Advice is what you get when the person you're talking to wants to reveal the superiority of his or her intelligence. If you weren't so stupid, after all, you wouldn't have your stupid problems. This goes right along with the narcissistic attitude I started the reading with. Psychotherapy is genuine conversation. Genuine conversation is exploration, articulation, and strategizing. When you're involved in genuine conversation, you're listening and talking, but mostly listening. Listening is paying attention. It's amazing what people will tell you if you listen. Sometimes if you listen to people, they will even tell you what's wrong with them. Sometimes they will even tell you how they plan to fix it. Sometimes that helps you fix something wrong with yourself. One surprising time, and this is only one occasion of many when such things have happened, I was listening to someone very carefully, and she told me within minutes, A, that she was a witch, and B, that her witch coven spent a lot of its time visualizing world peace together. She was a long-time lower-level functionary in some bureaucratic job. I would have never guessed that she was a witch. I also didn't know that witch covens spent any of their time visualizing world peace. I didn't know what to make of any of it either, but it wasn't boring, and that's something else. But it wasn't boring, and that's something. In my clinical practice, I talk and I listen. I talk more to some people and I listen more to others. That's how life is. Many of the people I listen to have no one else to talk to. Some of them are truly alone in the world. There are far more people like this than you think. That is so true. You don't meet them because they are alone. Like when you go around and you ride the bus or something, or you go on public transportation, there's so many people alone, and so many people neglect their parents and their grandparents. Even when the people that they see, they don't talk to them that much. The older people get, the more alone that they get. So, I mean, don't look at me. I like being alone, but everyone else, you guys are gonna be sad. Ha ha. Others are surrounded by tyrants or narcissists or drunks or traumatized people or professional victims. Some are not good at articulating themselves. They go off on tangents. They repeat themselves. They say vague and contradictory things. They're hard to listen to. Others have terrible things happening around them. They have patterns with Alzheimer's or sick children. There's not much time left over for their personal concerns. One time a client who I had been seeing for a few months came into my office for her scheduled appointment, and after some brief preliminaries, she announced, "I think I was raped." It is not easy to know how to respond to a statement like that, although there is frequently some mystery around such events. Often alcohol is involved, and as it is in most sexual assault cases, alcohol can cause ambiguity. That's partly because why people drink. Alcohol temporarily lifts the terrible burden of self-consciousness from people. Drunk people know about the future, but they don't care about it. That's exciting. That's exhilarating. Drunk people can party like there's no tomorrow, but because there is a tomorrow, most of the time, drunk people also get into trouble. They black out. They go to dangerous places with careless people. They have fun, but they also get raped. So I immediately thought something like that might be involved. How else to understand, I think. But that wasn't the end of the story. She added an extra detail. 5 times. The first sentence was awful enough, but the second produced something unfathomable. 5 times? What could that possibly mean? My client told me that she would go to a bar and have a few drinks. Someone would start to talk to her. She would end up at his place or her place with him. The evening would proceed inevitably into its sexual climax. The next day she would wake up uncertain about what happened, uncertain about her motives, uncertain about his motives, and uncertain about the world. Miss S, we'll call her, was vague to the point of non existence. She was a ghost of a person. She dressed, however, like a professional. She knew how to present herself for her first appearances. In consequences, she had finagled her way onto a government advisory board considering the construction of a major piece of transportation infrastructure, even though she knew nothing about government advising or construction. That's usually how they do it, huh? She also hosted a local public access radio show dedicated to small business. Even though she had never held a real job and knew nothing about being an entrepreneur, she had been receiving welfare payments for the entirety of her adulthood. Wow! This lady's interesting. I can picture her doing the public access show. This show is for small businesses. Yeah. Her parents had never provided her with a minute of attention. She had four brothers, and they were not at all good to her. She had no friends now and none in the past. She had no partner. She had no one to talk to, and she didn't know how to think on her own. It's not so funny anymore. That's not rare. She had no self. She was instead a walking cacophony of unintegrated experiences. I had tried previously to help her find a job. I asked her if she had a CV. She said yes. I asked her to bring it to me. She brought it into our next session. It was 50 pages long. It was in a file folder box, divided into sections, with manila tag separators, the ones with the little colorful index markers on the side. The sections included such topics as my dreams and books I have read. She had written down dozens of her nighttime dreams in the My Dreams sections and provided brief summaries and reviews of her reading material. This was what she proposed to send to prospective employers, or perhaps already had, who really knew. At least she's very productive. It is impossible to understand how much someone has to be no one at all to exist in a world where a file folder box containing 50 index pages listing dreams and novels constitutes a CV. Miss S knew nothing about herself. She knew nothing about other individuals. She knew nothing about the world. She was a movie played out of focus, and she was desperately waiting for a story about herself to make it all make sense. Hey, Keanu. My cats like my reading, too. If you add some sugar to cold water and stir it, the sugar will dissolve. If you heat up that water, you can dissolve more. If you heat the water to boiling, and you can add a lot more sugar and get that to dissolve too, then if you take the boiling sugar water and slowly cool it and don't bump it or jar it, you can trick it. I don't know how else to phrase this, into holding a lot more dissolved sugar than it would have if it had remained cold all along. That's called a supersaturated solution. If you drop a single crystal of sugar into the supersaturated solution, all the excess sugar will suddenly and dramatically crystallize. It's as if you were crying out for order. That was my client. People like her are the reason that many forms of psychotherapy currently practiced don't work. People can be confused that their psyches will be ordered and their lives improved by the adoption of any reasonable orderly system of interpretation. This is the bringing together of the disparate elements of their lives in a disciplined manner, any disciplined manner. So, if you have come apart at the seams, or if you never have been together at all, you can restructure your life on Freud, Jung, Adler, and Roger, or behavioral principles. At least then you make sense. At least then you're coherent. At least then you might be good for something. If you're not good for yet anything, you can't fix a car with an axe, but you can cut down a tree. That's still something. At about the same time I was seeing this client, the media was all afire with stories of recovered memories, particularly of sexual assault. The dispute raged apace with these genuine accounts of past trauma, or were they post hoc constructs dreamed up as a consequence of pressure wittingly or unwittingly applied and innocuous therapists grasped onto desperately by clinical clients all too eager to find a simple cause for all their troubles? Sometimes it was the former, perhaps, and sometimes the latter. I understood much more clearly and precisely, however, how easy it might be to install a false memory into a mental landscape as soon as my client revealed her uncertainty about her sexual experiences. The past appears fixed, but it's not in an important psychological sense. There's an awful lot to the past, after all, and the way we organize it can be subject to drastic revision. Imagine, for example, a movie where nothing but terrible things happen, But in the end, everything works out. Everything is resolved. A sufficiently happy ending can change the meaning of all the previous events. They can all be viewed as worthwhile, given that ending. Now imagine another movie. A lot of things are happening. They're all exciting and interesting. But there are a lot of them. 90 minutes in, and you start to worry. This is a great movie, you think, but there are a lot of things going on. I sure hope the filmmaker can pull it all together. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the story ends abruptly, unresolved, or something facile or cliche occurs. You leave deeply annoyed and unsatisfied, failing to notice that you were fully engaged and enjoying the movie almost the whole time you were in the theater. The present can change the past, and the future can change the present. That's a really great analogy. Except I don't agree with what he says about like memories changing and stuff. Some people remember things like clearly; they have a photographic memory. I did really well in school for one reason is because I have a really great memory. So when you are remembering the past as well, you remember some parts of it and forget others. You have clear memories of such things that happened but not others, of potentially equal import. Just as in the present you are aware of such aspects of your surroundings and unconscious of others, you categorize your experience, grouping some elements together and separating them from the rest. This is a mysterious arbitrariness about all of this. You don't form a comprehensive objective record. You can't. You just don't know enough. You just can't perceive enough. You're not objective either. You're alive. You're subjective. You have vested interest, at least in yourself, at least usually. What exactly should be included in the story? What exactly is the border between events? Like I said earlier, I wrote a book called Gonzo Education. It's a memoir about a 15-year period of my life, and I had to decide what I was going to include in the story and what I was going to leave out. The sexual abuse of children is distressingly common. However, it's not as common as poorly trained psychotherapists think, and it also does not always produce terribly damaged adults. People vary in their resilience. An event that will wipe one person out can be shrugged off by another, but therapists with little secondhand knowledge of Freud often axiomatically assume that a distressed adult in their practice must have been subject to childhood sexual abuse. Why else would they be distressed? So they dig and infer and intimate and suggest and overact and bias and tilt. They exaggerate the importance of some events and downplay the importance of others. They trim the facts to fit their theory, and they convince their clients that they were sexually abused if they could only remember. And then the clients start to remember, and then they start to accuse, and sometimes what they remember never happened, and the people accused are innocent. The good news, at least the therapist's theory remains intact. That's good for the therapist, but there's no shortage of collateral damage. However, people are often willing to produce a lot of collateral damage if they can retain their theory. I knew about all this when Miss S came to talk to me about her sexual experiences. When she recounted her trips to the single bars and the recurring aftermath, I thought a bunch of things at once. I thought, you're so vague and non-existent. You're a denizen of chaos in the other world. You're going 10 different places at the same time. Anyone can take you by the hand and guide you down their road of their choosing. After all, if you're not the leading man in your own drama, you're a bit player in someone else's, and you might well be assigned to play a dismal, lonely, and tragic part. After Mrs. S recounted her story, we sat there. I thought, you have normal sexual desires. You're extremely lonely. You're unfulfilled sexually. You're afraid of men and ignorant of the world and know nothing of yourself. You wander around like an accident waiting to happen, and the accident happens, and that's your life. I thought, part of you wants to be taken. Part of you wants to be a child. You were abused by your brothers and ignored by your father, and so part of you wants revenge upon men. Part of you is guilty. Another part is ashamed. Another part is thrilled and excited. Who are you? What did you do? What happened? What was the objective truth? There was no way of knowing the objective truth, and there never will be. There was no objective observer, and there never would be. There was no complete and accurate story. Such a thing did not and could not exist. There were and are only partial accounts and fragmentary viewpoints, but some are still better than others. Memory is not a description of the objective past. Memory is a tool. Memory is the past's guides to the future. If you remember that something bad happened and you can figure out why, then you can try to avoid that bad thing happening again. That's the purpose of memory. It's not to remember the past, it's to stop the same damn thing from happening over and over. I thought I could simplify Mrs. S's life. I could say that her suspicions of rape were fully justified and that her doubt along the events was nothing but additional evidence of her thorough and long-term victimization. I could insist that her sexual partners had a legal obligation to ensure that she was not too impaired by alcohol to give consent. I could tell her that she had indisputably been subject to violent and illicit acts, unless she had consented to each sexual move explicitly and verbally. I could tell her that she was an innocent victim. I could have told her all that, and it would have been true, and she would have accepted it as true and remembered it for the rest of her life. She would have been a new person with a new history and a new destiny. But I also thought I could tell Miss S that she is a walking disaster. I could tell her that she wanders into a bar like a courtesan in a coma, that she is a danger to herself and others, that she needs to wake up, and that if she goes to single bars and drinks too much and is taken home and has rough, violent sex, or even tender, caring sex, then what the hell does she expect? In other words, I could have told her in more philosophical terms that she was Nietzsche's pale criminal, the person who at one moment dares to break the sacred law and at the next shrinks from paying the price. And that would have been true, too, and she would have accepted it as such and remembered it. If I had been the adherent of a left wing social justice ideology, I would have told her the first story. If I had been the adherent of a conservative ideology, I would have told her the second. And her responses, after having been told either the first or second story, would have proved to my satisfaction. And hers, that the story I've been told was true, completely, irrefutably true, and that would have been advice. That was from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. That was great. That was the first part of rule number 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. That was all about a particular case study of a patient that he had who was quite eccentric. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that, click the thumbs up button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And also check out my own book. It's called Gonzo Education. Thanks again.